The sound changes first, not louder, wrong. A vibration that doesn't belong. A shudder that moves through the floor, the walls, the air itself. Something that tells every nervous system in the space the same thing at the same time. This is not normal. Hands freeze, breathing shortens. Eyes search for something familiar and find nothing. There is no warning, no gradual buildup. 1 second, everything follows expectation. The next second, expectation collapses. The environment stops behaving the way it always has. And when that happens, the human mind does not look for solutions. It looks for patterns that no longer exist. Time compresses. People speak at once, not in sentences, in fragments, half orders, half questions. Voices overlap, cancel each other out. The noise isn't panic yet. Panic comes later. This is the moment before it, the moment when confusion is still pretending to be control. Somewhere nearby, an indicator spikes. Somewhere else, something goes silent. The system is no longer symmetrical. One side behaves one way. Another side behaves differently. That asymmetry is dangerous because humans are trained to trust balance. When balance disappears, instinct fills the gap. Instinct says, react. Do something, anything, now. But there is no checklist for this, no practiced response, no memory to lean on. Whatever this is, it wasn't supposed to happen this way. The rules that normally apply are suddenly unreliable, and no one has time to confirm which ones still work. Seconds pass. Or maybe they don't. In moments like this, time stops behaving too. Bodies tense, shoulders rise, fine motor control begins to degrade. This is measurable, even if no one is measuring it yet. Heart rates climb, vision narrows, auditory exclusion starts to creep in. The mind begins filtering aggressively, not for truth, but for speed. Someone tries to take charge by raising their voice. Someone else interrupts. Another person repeats the same information that was just said, louder, as if volume can restore certainty. It can't. What's missing is not information. What's missing is coherence. The situation is evolving faster than the human brain prefers. Multiple variables are changing at once. The environment no longer responds predictably to inputs. That combination is a known trigger for cognitive overload. When overload hits, people don't make worse decisions. They make simpler ones. Simpler feels safer, and that is the trap. In these first seconds, the wrong decision does not look wrong. It looks efficient. It looks decisive. It looks like taking control. Instinct pushes toward symmetry, toward force, toward correction, even when correction may amplify the problem. No one here knows yet how bad it is. No one knows how much time is left. No one knows which instincts are about to become liabilities. What they do know, in their bodies, not their thoughts, is that the margin for error has vanished. This is the window. Not the dramatic moment people remember later, the quiet, collapsing one where thinking clearly is hardest. And somewhere inside this noise, this pressure, this distortion of time, a decision is about to be made. Not because it is proven correct, but because it resists the pull of panic just long enough to exist. The shift is subtle at first. The voices don't get louder, they get faster. Sentences shorten, verbs disappear. Communication turns into signals instead of meaning. This is where coordination starts to break, even though everyone believes they're still coordinating. Stress has crossed a threshold. When humans enter high arousal states without a clear framework, the brain prioritizes urgency over accuracy. The need to act overwhelms the need to understand. In complex systems, that reversal is dangerous. People begin anchoring to the first explanation that feels plausible, not because it's correct, but because it's available. Once anchored, contradictory information is filtered out. This isn't stubbornness, it's cognitive self-defense. Someone repeats a familiar procedure, not because it fits, but because it exists. Familiarity feels like control. The body relaxes slightly when a known script is activated, even if the script is wrong. Others follow. This is how collective panic forms, not as screaming or chaos, but as synchronized error. Each individual believes they are thinking clearly. Each believes they are helping. But the system as a whole starts reinforcing the same flawed assumptions over and over, faster and louder. Feedback loops tighten. One action creates a response that looks like confirmation. That response justifies the next action. The loop accelerates. The window for reflection closes. Physiologically, this is the point where stress hormones peak. Cortisol narrows focus. Adrenaline boosts gross motor function at the expense of precision. The brain shifts away from analytical processing and toward reflexive pattern matching. In other words, people stop evaluating options and start executing instincts. Instinct says, fix the imbalance. Instinct says, apply force. Instinct says, regain symmetry. But the environment is no longer linear. Inputs don't produce proportional outputs anymore. What used to stabilize the system now destabilizes it further. Some sense this. They feel the resistance. The controls don't respond the way they should. The system pushes back. That resistance increases stress, which increases force, which increases resistance again. Another loop. Meanwhile, time pressure intensifies. Not because the clock is ticking, but because uncertainty is unbearable. Humans would rather act wrongly than wait correctly when fear is high. Waiting feels like failure. Acting feels like agency. Communication degrades further. Information arrives fragmented, delayed, incomplete. No one has the full picture, but everyone assumes someone else does. Responsibility diffuses. Authority blurs. This is where coordination fractures. Not because people stop caring, but because caring is no longer enough to keep cognition intact. Errors stack. Small ones first, then larger ones. Each error increases the cost of reversal. Eventually, reversing course feels impossible, even if it's still technically available. At this stage, panic is no longer emotional, it is structural. The system is being driven by instinctive corrections that are no longer valid. The collective mind is trapped inside a shrinking decision space, chasing control that no longer exists. And yet, within this collapse, there is still a gap, a narrow one. A moment where someone notices that instinct itself has become the problem, that the urge to fix, to correct, to force the system back into shape is exactly what's making it worse. That moment doesn't feel calm. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels wrong, because it goes against everything the body is screaming to do. And choosing it requires something rare under pressure, the ability to pause inside panic without being consumed by it. The instinct is still there. It hasn't weakened. If anything, it's louder now. The body wants resolution. The mind wants closure. Every signal points toward immediate correction. Push harder, compensate faster, override resistance. And yet someone doesn't. Not because they are calm, not because they are confident, but because something doesn't add up. It's a pause measured in seconds, but cognitively it's an interruption, a break in the loop, the difference between reacting and noticing. The environment is no longer responding proportionally. Inputs that should stabilize are amplifying instability. That contradiction is subtle, but it's enough. It triggers doubt, not fear, but suspicion. Suspicion slows action. Instead of forcing symmetry, this person allows asymmetry to exist. Instead of correcting immediately, they observe the imbalance. They accept that the system is already broken and that pretending otherwise is wasting time. This runs against training, against experience, against muscle memory. Every reflex says, regain control by tightening grip. But tightening the grip is what's feeding the collapse. So the decision isn't to fix, it's to stop fixing. That sounds passive. It isn't. It requires active resistance to instinct. It requires holding position while everything, noise, pressure, urgency, pushes toward action. Doing less feels irresponsible when lives depend on outcomes. But sometimes, doing less is the only way to prevent doing worse. This decision doesn't arrive as a fully formed plan. There is no clarity, no certainty, just a recognition that the usual logic no longer applies. So the approach changes. Instead of trying to restore normal function, the goal shifts to managing what remains. Instead of symmetry, the focus becomes survivability. Instead of precision, tolerance. The system is treated as compromised, not recoverable. This reframing matters. It reduces the number of variables. It narrows the decision space. It replaces optimization with containment. Others don't immediately understand this shift. Some resist it. It feels like surrender. It feels like giving up control when control is still expected. But control at this point is an illusion. By accepting instability instead of fighting it, the feedback loops weaken. The system stops escalating itself, not because it's fixed, but because it's no longer being provoked. Stress doesn't disappear. Panic doesn't vanish, but it becomes bounded, manageable enough to work within. This is the exception, not a bold move, a restrained one, not brilliance, discipline. The decision doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't even promise survival. It only does one thing. It prevents the situation from becoming worse, faster. In extreme scenarios, that alone can be the difference between total loss and partial outcome. What's remarkable isn't that this choice was made. It's that it was made while everything else was pushing in the opposite direction. Because under collective panic, resisting instinct is harder than any technical challenge. The body is optimized for speed, not restraint, for action, not inhibition. Yet here, in the narrowest window, inhibition becomes the most functional response available. And once that choice exists, once panic stops driving every input, a different kind of thinking becomes possible. Not comfortable, not safe, but clear enough. The decision didn't work because it was clever. It worked because it aligned with how humans actually function under extreme stress, not how manuals assume they do. When panic peaks, the human brain loses its ability to manage complexity. Working memory collapses. Attention narrows. The mind can no longer track multiple changing variables at once. In that state, adding more actions, more corrections, more inputs only accelerates failure. The earlier instinctive responses were doing exactly that. Each attempt to fix the system increased cognitive load. Each correction introduced new variables. Each added variable demanded attention that the brain no longer had available. The result wasn't control, it was saturation. The restrained decision interrupted this process. By accepting instability instead of fighting it, the number of required decisions dropped. Fewer inputs meant fewer errors. Fewer errors meant fewer cascading consequences. This wasn't optimization, it was damage control. From a human factors perspective, this matters. Systems don't fail all at once. They fail through interaction with human operators who are trying to help. Under pressure, well-intentioned actions often become destabilizing forces because they are based on outdated assumptions about system behavior. The key shift here was cognitive, not technical. Instead of asking, how do we restore normal operation? The question became, what is the system capable of tolerating right now? That change reframed everything. Tolerance is broader than control. It allows for imperfection. It accepts asymmetry. It works with degraded performance instead of denying it. For humans under stress, this is critical because tolerance reduces the need for precision, and precision is one of the first things to disappear under adrenaline. The restrained approach also altered group dynamics. When someone stops escalating, others unconsciously follow. Not immediately, not consciously, but the tempo changes. Voices slow. Actions become fewer but more deliberate. The collective cognitive load decreases just enough for coordination to partially recover. This isn't leadership in the inspirational sense. It's leadership through constraint. Another factor is expectation management. By abandoning the goal of full recovery, disappointment stops consuming mental resources. People stop chasing an impossible outcome and start focusing on achievable ones. This reduces emotional volatility, which in turn stabilizes decision-making. Stress hormones don't vanish, but they plateau instead of spiking. Importantly, this decision didn't rely on superior information. The person making it didn't know more than others. They simply recognized that the environment had changed faster than instinct could adapt. That recognition matters because instinct is built on past patterns. When a situation has no precedent, instinct becomes unreliable. Continuing to obey it is not bravery. It's inertia. The decision worked because it created cognitive space, space to observe instead of react, space to coordinate instead of override, space to think just enough, not clearly, not comfortably, but sufficiently. In extreme events, sufficient is often the highest achievable standard. This wasn't a solution, it was a containment of failure. And in systems on the brink of collapse, containing failure is sometimes the only form of success available. Afterward, people try to explain moments like this with character. They look for traits, experience, nerves of steel, something internal and exceptional that separates one person from the rest. That explanation is comforting and incomplete. What actually echoes from moments like this is not heroism, but a pattern. Under collective panic, humans don't fail because they feel fear. They fail because fear accelerates instinct beyond its useful range. Instinct evolved for fast, familiar threats. When the environment changes faster than experience can update, instinct becomes outdated in real time. That's the cognitive trap. Most people don't panic irrationally. They panic efficiently. They converge on the same assumptions, the same reactions, the same corrective impulses. Panic is not chaos. It's alignment around the wrong model of reality. Once that alignment forms, it resists disruption. Any action that contradicts the group's momentum feels dangerous, irresponsible, even wrong. This is why collective error is so persistent. Breaking from it requires not confidence, but tolerance for discomfort. The decision in this case didn't eliminate fear. It didn't restore certainty. It didn't save the system. What it did was interrupt inevitability. It proved that even when collapse feels unavoidable, the path of collapse is still negotiable for a short time. That window exists between stimulus and reaction, and it is narrower than most people realize. In that window, thinking doesn't look like analysis. It looks like restraint, like hesitation, like refusing to satisfy the urge to act immediately. This is why such decisions are rare. They don't feel intelligent in the moment. They feel exposed, lonely, misaligned with everyone else in the room. But cognitively, they do something essential. They decouple action from panic. Once that decoupling happens, even briefly, outcomes change. Not always dramatically, sometimes only marginally, but marginal differences compound in extreme systems. What remains after events like this is not a lesson, but a warning. That clarity under pressure is not about speed. That control is not the same as force. That instinct, while powerful, is not sacred. And most importantly, that the most dangerous moment in any collective crisis is not when things break, but when everyone reacts to the break in the same way. Because collapse doesn't require bad intentions. It only requires unexamined agreement. The echo of this moment isn't about what saved the situation. It's about what didn't make it worse. And in the seconds before everything fell apart, that distinction mattered more than anything else.